We're moving into the final stretch of our sessions here on LPTV, and we're dedicating our remaining time to learning to take care of oneself, others, and the planet. This is our passion not just today on LPTV, but every day of the year for the Learning Planet team and our 350 plus Alliance members around the globe. If you're part of an organization or an institution and you want to unite with us to transform education, then head to our website where you'll find all the information you need and how to apply to join the Alliance. This festival and its 500 plus events is just a glimpse of what this community comes together to co-create, and it is a testament to its dedication to creating the future of education and learning. It is the future of education and learning in Sierra Leone that our next guest is focused on. So now let's head to West Africa and listen to a keynote from the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education and the Chief Innovation Officer for the Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation in Sierra Leone. Welcome to the Learning Planet Festival, Minister David Moinina Sengeh. Welcome to LPTV.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me to LPTV. First of all, thank you for the invitation to speak on this very important topic of taking care of oneself, others, and the planet on this World Education Day. Caretaking is a central theme as we rebuild our education systems after the COVID closures and years of underinvestment. But I must start by saying that it's something that we all struggle with. Even I need to learn and improve and how to take care of myself, because we all must. Nobody can get it perfectly. It's a journey we must always take to beyond. We recognize the importance of transforming our education systems. It will be the key accelerator of all the education that the University General has said. We should be filled with a sense of urgency. We have seen that there are so many opportunities to improve education, so many technological breakthroughs, and seemingly so little time before 2030 we have to meet those goals. The COVID-19 pandemic cost us several years of progress, and in many instances, we went backwards. So we cannot afford to lose anymore. To reach our goals, we must all have find the value. I believe all that to be true. At the same time, we will not truly transform our education systems if we impart the logic that has left many of us, especially our students, on the brink of burnout. We work hard to uphold the right to education, to uphold the right to education around the world. But as a good friend reminded me, we must not forget that the right to rest is also a human right. If we sacrifice one in pursuit of the other, we will have made little progress. Schools are often the fulcrum where society's expectations and the uncertainty about the future are consciously or unconsciously expressed. Students absorb the signal sent in the rating age, and this can make them anxious about their role in the future. At an early age, they do not necessarily have the personal insights or tools to deal with the many challenges and opportunities that the world brings. And if we do not teach students to deal with the opportunities and enable technological revolution while they are young, it will be much harder for them to become caretakers of the planet when they grow older. In Sierra Leone, we recognize this in our approach to curriculum development. There are those that will say that our educational system should just focus on the basics, especially since many students are currently deprived of the opportunity to get a solid start in educational development. I believe this will be a tragic mistake. So, we're transforming our education systems to both deliver better foundational learning outcomes and the competency they need to for the 21st century. We design all of our curricula so the students will adopt 5 key competencies, what we call the 5 C's. That's comprehension, creativity, critical thinking, computational thinking, and civics. So because we want to send a signal to all of our students that they have the potential to become caring, creative nation builders. More than half of our population is under 20. So we're sending a signal about what kind of society we want them to build, what kind of society we want them to live in. It is so important for us that our students are excited about the future and feel they have the tools to become productive citizens. Only then can we become a nation with educated, empowered, and helpful citizens capable of realizing their fullest potential. Personally, I also believe that we do the best work when we take care of ourselves and explore many sides of our creative identity. In addition to my duties as a minister, my husband and father of two beautiful daughters. I'm reading a book recently called Radical Inclusion, and I'll make music on the sound. I do these things because it fills me with a sense of play and recharge my battery. They're absolutely essential to my success as a minister, because when I leave all the meetings that I make during the day and I get home, it is important that I'm able to find some kind of way to recharge to continue the next day, because there's so much work for us all to do. In addition, I'm a big believer in teams. That's not just why I play football as well over the weekend. I know that I get a lot of recognition for the education transformation that Sierra Leone does the president, political heads. I contribute my part to advocacy for education internationally, but I could not do any of that if I were not supported by strong teams at home, on abroad, and at work. I believe that trust and finding opportunities for growth is one of the keys to building these things that allow us all to be accountable. Let me give you an example. When I joined government, I was excited about the potential of changing the lives of millions of people. But I also got very inspired by the one or two lives we get to impact directly within our institution every day. One person is Kamara, who was at the front desk of the minister's office when I was approaching the minister. I was advised there by many different people to change the town front office. Including her, because they said you need to bring in your own people. I didn't. Instead, I've invested in them as they pursued their education and supported them with resources to upscale. Umu started at the Ministry as a volunteer in 2011. She was then recruited in 2014 as a third grade class. I was just moved to level 1 stenographer in 2020. Started a part-time degree program in 2017 and completed it in 2022. Now, this story is really important to me because my own mother, who was also at this ministry, retired, started as a grade 2 clerk and retired as a grade 2 clerk. Now, when she was doing her thesis, I would periodically engage her on her research and offer her feedback where necessary. I did read the entire thesis when it was done, and it was really good. During the last few years in my front office, she's worked very closely with my delivery team, who have given her significant programmatic activity, and she's continued to support the early childhood education unit and several other big campaigns in our ministry. Such one opportunity emerged recently, actually just a couple of days ago, we were in Ghana, to bring a team on a study tour, which included the deputy minister in charge of early education, the chief education officer, several directors, and a teacher. I had no hesitation to include her on the list. She deserved it. She arrives to the office before I get there and leaves after I do. And I know that I do have long days, which means she often leaves after 7 p.m. She has never flown on a plane until now, but her contributions are as significant as anyone else. I believe that it should be possible for our staff to be given opportunities to grow so that we can all create more impact in society. I believe that where you start should not determine where you end. I'm grateful that I'm in a position to direct impact at the national level, institutional level, and individual level, not by favor, but to optimize for impact. I'm blessed to have Umo on my team, and I can't wait to see how high she climbs. So in closing, let me say that we should move fast, but not so fast that we neglect ourselves. We must find time to play and express ourselves creatively. And to balance all of this, we must work in teams where everyone has a space to grow, lives and is respected, and lives a balanced life. Thank you so much for having me on here, and I look forward to engaging with many of the conversations and discussions online. Thank you.
Thank you to Minister David Moinina Sengeh from Sierra Leone for joining us here at the Learning Planet Festival, and thank you for sharing your vision on the future of education and learning with us. Now, facts and science are the foundations of all of our work here at the Learning Planet, but we also know the power of science fiction as a tool for creating and imagining new ways of thinking about our environment, our society, and how we interact with them. Now, on LPTV, we have a world-renowned science fiction writer who has won Hugo and Nebula Awards for his books that are rooted in nature and sustainability, and which regularly feature scientists as the book's heroes. Joining us now to talk about his book, The Ministry for the Future, and to share his perspectives on planetizenship, it's a pleasure to welcome Kim Stanley Robinson to the Learning Planet Festival. Kim, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Kristen. It's a pleasure to be with you all. And yes, I wrote a book called The Ministry for the Future. It was published about 2.5 years ago. And since then, it has been helping people, I can tell, to visualize what a successful future will look like in the next, say, 30 years as humanity comes to grip with the problem of climate change, and with establishing a civilization that's in balance with the biosphere that sustains us, in balance over the long haul for no matter how many humans there are, with justice for all, including our wild brothers and sisters. It's a difficult project. We're in a dangerous moment in history. Things can go wrong, and it's hard to keep hope. And I want to focus this talk in particular on how to keep hope and to put hope to use in such a dangerous time. It's a matter of balance, because you can't just say things are going to be all right. Not in the situation we're in now, with too much CO2 in the atmosphere, more coming, and we are going to have a lot of setbacks, a lot of defeats in the political battles, even if we win. So it's just not a simple matter of saying, well, I'll hope for the best and we'll see what happens. No, your hope has to be turned into a kind of a weapon. It needs to be a support system for your action. So there needs to be something not like cruel optimism, which would be just saying things will be all right, but more like angry hope being put to use for the work that you do. So climate dread is a real thing, and a lot of people feel it, rightfully so. You should feel it. We are in a situation of dread. If we don't change the way that we power civilization and the way that we interact with our biosphere, we could cause a mass extinction event, and we could also destroy the foundations of civilization itself. So humanity would be in terrible trouble. So dread is appropriate and has to be held in a balance with hope. But even though our dread is real, hope is always real. Hope is a biological function. Let's put it that way. If you're hungry, you're feeling hope that you get a meal. Bacteria have hope that they can get their meals and that they can connect up with other bacteria. So there is a biological basis to hope that's always in us. Where there's life, there's hope. That is a literal fact. Let me give you some reasons for hope in this time, and perhaps these also can sketch out projects that can be pursued. Given the reality, by the time we stop burning fossil fuels to power civilization, to do agriculture, to have transport, for all the ways that we burn it now, And it's been good for civilization that we have done so. By the time we stop and shift to a clean energy transport and agricultural system, there will be too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We're going to have a carbon overshoot in the next 20 years. And that means that we're going to have to be drawing CO2 down out of the atmosphere as one of the things that we do, in the same way that we have waste systems now for our wastes and for civilization wastes. We collect them, we process them, we re-enter them into the environment in a cleaner and more healthy state. Exactly the same way we have sewage systems, we are going to have carbon dioxide drawdown systems. Luckily, they don't have to all be industrial machinery. We're talking about billions of tons of dry ice, which is really more dry ice than we need. It's going to have to be sequestered somewhere. And if we did it mechanically, it would be a lot of machinery, like the auto industry in total, perhaps, or like the oil industry, but doing a different and healthier process at that point. That's a promising thought, but we need to draw down more carbon dioxide than we could build the machinery for it. That's okay. There are naturally based carbon drawdown systems that can be installed. And presumably you all know about them. I won't go into too much detail except to point out one that is especially interesting. We can grow more forests. We can indeed encourage kelp beds in the coastal waters offshore. And the most powerful naturally based carbon drawdown method has to do with agriculture. We can do regenerative agriculture, and while we grow food that we need to keep us alive on this planet, we can also suck carbon into the soil in that same process of growing food. It's a double good. It's a technique. It isn't being employed now, but it could be employed. Many of the elements of it are already invented, and they merely have to be paid for, and the expertise and technologies involved employed also. So it is a transition, but here's the potential. The agricultural fields that we've been using for these last few centuries and more to grow our food contain about 1% of carbon by weight of soil. And that's because we've depleted carbon in the way that we've grown food during those times. If we grow food in ways that restore carbon to the soil, the capacity of the soil will top out. It isn't infinite, but it is possible to get to 5 or 6% of carbon in the soil. And since we're at this point only at 1 or 2%, the differential between those two, the capacity of our agricultural fields for carbon uptake, is vast. It equals, in fact, all of the CO2 that we've ever put into the atmosphere since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Now, not all of that CO2 is going to go back into the soil. We don't need it to. It would be difficult to accomplish. But the reality is we can do it if we intend to and if we pay for it. So now, that's a good thought and a reason for hope. The other one is that paying for it is also possible. Anything we can do, we can afford to do, John Maynard Keynes once said in an earlier financial crisis. And we are in a financial system now that rewards what they call the highest rate of return. And the highest rate of return is poorly calculated so that it's destructive to justice and to the environment and the biosphere over the long haul. So recalibrating how we value our activities is crucial and is being done. And there are already really significant movements on the front of how to pay for the enormous amount of work that is necessary. Just at COP27 in Egypt, they established a loss and damage fund, currently empty, but when it's full, it will be a way to pay for necessary mitigation and adaptation work. That's what loss and damage means. And the rich countries are going to have to contribute money, and the poor countries will put it to work. The example for that already working in this world is done by the International Monetary Fund. They have a system that they call special drawing rights. And that simply means that nations, states that are desperate to solve a financial or an environmental problem can have special drawing rights with the International Monetary Fund. And essentially, they get a loan that they do not have to pay back. It's the creation of new and solid money, essentially backed by the US dollar, which is the benchmark currency on this planet. And they can put that to use. If they had to invent their own local money, it would create inflation and then hyperinflation. It wouldn't work. You need new money in this world to be the rock solid currencies of the rich countries of the West, especially the US dollar. That happened in quantitative easing during 2008 and 2020 with the pandemic. It can happen again. It can be called carbon quantitative easing. And there is a network for greening the financial system that is composed precisely of the big central banks, 90 of them, who are collaborating in figuring out how to green money from the start. So the money can be there. And since we need it, we'll make it up. And what that means, that new money devoted to carbon causes, it means full employment. It means every human alive on Earth can have a job to help to do the necessary work to get us into a right relationship with our biosphere, which is our extended body and our only home. We have to take care of it. And if we do, there'll be two goods that come out of it that I'll end with. One of them is something like full employment, in that the governments of the world will be the ones creating this new money and then dispersing it through the business world to spend on the necessary green projects to get us through this bad spot in history. And then secondly, meaning. People crave meaning. If you don't have meaning, life has lost its point. And indeed, the existential problem, since I'm speaking to France, this is a profound and always present problem of existentialism. We make up what life means, and we have to make it into a project. When I was young, there was a sense of pointlessness and meaninglessness. Like, why are we even doing this? We get educated, we get a job, we do everything we can to support our families, then we die. What's the point? Well, now there is a point. We have to save the biosphere. The meaning has been imposed on us, but it is a very great meaning. So I'll end with this. Life now has a meaning. Your life has a project. You nearly have to identify it. It will be there for us. We'll work together, and we can have hope that working together in solidarity, we can solve the climate crisis during the young people's lifetimes, if not those of us who are older. So I wish you all well, and I'm going to pass this back to Kristen, and best of luck to everybody there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim Stanley Robinson. Thank you for sharing your messages on hope, on meaning, and your thoughts on planetizenship, and how this mindset fits with many of the themes that we find in your books. And thank you to those of you that have responded to the questions we asked a short while back. We asked, what helps you imagine a more positive future for our planet? Is it reading books and comics, watching films and series? Perhaps you prefer writing, dance, and art, or is it talking and sharing with your friends? I have the results here, and I say it's very evenly split between reading books and comics, watching films and series, and writing, art, and dance. It's about 30-40% for each of these. But a resounding 72% of you get imagination and hope from talking and sharing with your friends. So connect with our Discord server and connect with more people and get more hope and imagination there. We're continuing to think about the future and are headed to the south of the United States now, as we are welcoming Dr. Peter Schlosser, Vice President, Vice Provost, and Professor at the Global Futures Lab of Arizona State University. Peter, welcome to the Learning Planet Festival and welcome to LPTV. Over to you.
Thank you, Christine. So the topic of this symposium is, or if this particular session of this great symposium, and thank you for having me as a speaker, is learning to take care of oneself, others, and the planet. But that's a big topic and a wide range of issues. But of course, they are hanging together. Taking care of oneself, taking care of the planet can actually be seen as two sides of the same coin. Now, where are we right now? Our planet is actually in dire straits, and we are experiencing crises more frequently at more places, at higher amplitudes and different types. So we have imposed pressures on our planet that are showing negative effects that impact life from global society to individuals. And there is actually growing concern about the future of our planet. And for example, there is within that domain of concern, there is what is often called climate anxiety. And it is actually a real thing. And we see that in some of the youth movements, Friday for Future, etc. And of course, we have to make sure that we are given the magnitude of the task to get back on track with our planet. We have to make sure that we are not going from a place where we had a lot of climate change deniers to one where we have climate change fatalists, where people say, this task is too big, we have moved too far, we are just riding it out, there is not much we can do. And that would clearly not serve our planet and our families, ourselves well. It's not a good solution to simultaneously do nothing to improve our future outcomes and hope for a better tomorrow. So what that means is we must stay engaged. We have to keep hope alive. Hope requires commitment and resolve. So I still hope that humans will find a way to get back to living in balance with Earth systems. And that's why we created here at Arizona State University in the southwest of the United States, the so-called Global Futures Laboratory. It is an entity that is dedicated to look at the future of our planet, including the future of humankind from individuals to global society in a holistic fashion, bringing together if different disciplines from the natural sciences to humanities, social sciences, medical sciences, engineering sciences, to actually combine the knowledge that we need to understand the complexity of the planet in which we live, but also the complexity of the structures that we are living in, our societal structures. It is a space in which we do research and also learning, where we produce options for solutions and where we engage with the outside. So this is the Learning Planet. So let's talk a bit about learning. Within the Global Futures Laboratory, we have designed a college with 4 schools dedicated to looking at the complexity of our planet, its sustainability, the role innovation can play in shaping a future that is more sustainable. And we just added a 4th school that is dedicated to the future of our oceans as one of the major compartments of the Earth system that houses the largest biome, that takes up quite a bit of the excess CO2, and that holds about 90 to 90% of the excess heat that came from global warming. So within that schools and the college within their housing, we are preparing learners. And here we are not just talking about the college students, but we are looking at lifelong learning, because we are convinced that the task that we have at hand requires learning from pre-K to senior living. We prepare them for the tasks of engaging with the situation we are finding ourselves in and helping to create ways forward that offer opportunities for the next generations. One element that we are exploring in that is the tool of virtual reality. We all know that immersion into the environment is a powerful experience. I remember when I started my career and I started to go on ocean expeditions, including icebreakers to high northern and southern latitude, it changed my view of the world. So it is really powerful to give students and other learners an experience where they can immerse into the subject that they are studying. Next, but we also know that this cannot be provided for everybody. So the next best tool then is to use virtual reality to bring people into these environments so that they can actually understand different cultures, different geographies, different policies and geopolitical situations, so that they can get a good grasp of what does it mean to change not just local conditions, but also the globe as a whole. And we do that through what is called Dreamscape Learn, where we have prepared some of the courses already and where we are preparing further courses and test that. But learning alone is not enough. We have to translate that into solutions. If we want to propel change, education is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We have to take what we learn into the solution space. And the situation that we find ourselves in is one where I would say we are actually right now not confined by the lack of ideas, what we can do, but by the will to take what we learned into action. What we always, or not always, sometimes we shorthand that as societal will. So one of the major tasks that we have ahead of us, if we want to take care of the planet, of ourselves, we really have to figure out how do we as humans make decisions? How are they determined by value systems? How persistent are these value systems? And how can learning actually help to not only understand that, but also to change our willingness to deal with change in a positive way, change for opportunity, not for sacrifice. To conclude then, taking care of our planet is rooted in taking responsibility for our actions and being willing to change. The future of humankind critically depends on the choices we make as individuals and as members of global society. We are not making the right choices. If we are not making the right choices, our planet will self-regulate, and that will have highly undesirable outcomes for humankind. And so with that, I would like to conclude my remarks and hand back to Christine.
Thank you for being part of the festival, Peter. It's been a pleasure having you with us here on LPTV, and I know that Arizona State University is a part of many other of the events of the festival later this week. So if you want to find out more about what ASU is doing, make sure you check out the full festival program here on the festival website. We're staying in the US for the next segment on our learning to take care of oneself, others, and the planet, as our next guest is the professor of Tibetan, Buddhist, and Contemplative Studies at the University of Virginia, which is the largest Tibetan studies program in the Americas. Here to share his thoughts and perspectives on learning to take care of oneself, others, and the planet, it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. David Germano to LPTV. Over to you, David.
Thank you so much. I would like today to contemplate the flourishing and suffering of young people and the imperative to transform higher education. So I begin with flourishing. In the modern academy, such models are sometimes summarized into three families of approach. Medicine's objective approach focused on health span, lifespan, physical health, longevity. Positive psychology's subjective approach, concentrating on experience and optimal mental functioning. And philosophical and contemplative approaches stressing deeper meaning, spirituality, self-transcendence, awe. In Corey Key's two continua model of mental well-being, the first continua is from the presence to the absence of disease, and the second is from languishing to flourishing. Thus, the mitigation of disease and distress is not the same as the active facilitation of the presence of flourishing. In the 1960s, Abraham Maslow offered the famous hierarchy of needs model, the basic needs for physical survival, psychological needs, self-fulfillment needs, and the needs for self-transcendence, with peak experiences, epiphanies, flow, awe, and spiritual experiences. But the dominant influence in how US universities represent well-being is Bill Hetler's The 6 Dimensions of Wellness Wheel model: physical, social, emotional, occupational, spiritual, intellectual. Each element is an adjectival indicator pointing to entire domains of human experience and activity. And in this, they contrast sharply to positive psychology models that focus on optimal psychological functioning, such as Martin Seligman's PERMA, positive emotions, engagement, positive relations, meaning, and accomplishment. These offer a series of nouns instead of adjectives, pointing to specific elements suggested as being vital for a life of flourishing. The ACIP model by Richard Davidson, awareness, connection, insight, purpose, adds the recognition of the changing and vital role of awareness in the attention economy with its fissuring, distortion, and manipulation. It advocates for the value of contemplative practice in cultivating attention in ways that are productive of flourishing. However, I would suggest there are fundamental problems with these models. First, the excessively individual focus exemplified in the idea that well-being is an individual practice. This ignores the porosity and relational identity of the individual self, and it ignores that external, material, and structural constraints and affordances, differing due to race, religion, socioeconomic status, and gender, significantly impact upon pathways to flourishing for individuals and communities. Thus, equitable flourishing requires systems and environments that necessitate collective decisions and collective actions. Second, such models are androcentric and ignore the more than human world, the way in which land can be understood, especially in indigenous cultures, as constituting and expressing us, and it ignores the devastating impact some models of human flourishing have had upon the climate, other forms of life, and land itself. Third, I would acknowledge that culturally specific values underlay all models of flourishing. Flourishing is a constellation of ideas, ideals, emotions, relations, and environments that transform in different ways across time and culture, such that models and practices of flourishing are always situated and always specific. And then there is the reality that students are suffering far more than they are flourishing today. In order to flourish, they need to heal. We are in the middle of an unfolding crisis, a historic degradation of well-being amongst our youth. And the signs of this crisis are dramatically escalating rates of stress, severe anxiety, deep depression, loneliness, substance abuse, self-harm, and suicide rates. In the US, for example, suicide has become the second leading cause of death amongst college students, while 8.9% of all high school students try to kill themselves. We need to understand the causes to design solutions. Our children live in an era of attentional toxicity. Ubiquitous smartphones drive distraction and undermine focused attention, while social media facilitates systemic insecurity triggered by judgmental comparisons. Meanwhile, surveillance capitalism involves powerful companies reaching into our youth's most intimate spaces, their own awareness and attentional capacities, in order to commodify their attention and consequently manipulate it and their behavior in order to make them both more predictable and tractable for market needs. And this isn't even to mention social isolation, the environmental crisis, expanding racial and socioeconomic inequity, school shootings, weapons of mass destruction, artificial intelligence displacing us at the top of the food chain. And then there's change. Change has fundamentally changed and in unprecedented ways. Change, ever more rapid in speed, ever more complex in character, and ever more pervasive in scope, extending across every sector. Young people are having to deal with change in ways no previous generation has had to struggle with in social formations, careers, technology, culture, economics, environment. And the result of this is that the long quiet of childhood that could be contemplative and reflective is gone and has been replaced by external noise mediated by technological devices that is constant, divisive, powerful, judgmental, and manipulative. And thus we have overwhelming levels of new stress, challenges outstripping our resources for resilient navigation, leading to these dramatic escalations in anxiety and depression, self-harm, and suicide. And thus we arrive at the moral imperative for higher education. We are called to systemic, wide-ranging, and rapid transformation in which equitable student flourishing is the foundation, path, and goal. We must bridge the institutional divides between academics and student affairs to weave more integrated experiences for students. And we must do so with contemplative pedagogies of flourishing throughout curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular circles, pedagogies that are deeply reflective, highly experiential, life integrated, peer-to-peer oriented, and deliberately supportive of the flourishing of students. And it is crucial that we foster cultural and institutional change in a systemic fashion across all the interdependent dimensions that constitute higher education, and which promotes flourishing as an ideal and practice throughout the institution. A university devoted to the flourishing of students must model flourishing explicitly with a research-informed model and associated measures to assess the impact of innovations, determine resource allocation, and make programmatic decisions. And such a model should be grounded in objective, subjective, contemplative, social, and environmental dimensions of flourishing, as well as be sensitive to the profound diversity of human experience. Supporting the development of the fundamental human capacity for contemplation is essential. Between stimulus and response, between a situation and our actions, we pause to reflect, to ponder a subject deeply and widely beyond the pressure for an immediate response and action. And for those spaces to be generative, they must be protected, inclusive, and expansive without pressures and distractions, which leads in turn to decreased stress, enhanced creativity, greater insight, and deeper equipoise. And we can use such spacious calm to become more conscious of our dispositions, practices, views, and the outcomes they generate in our life. We can better align them in an intentional manner with individual and collective outcomes of flourishing as we deliberately work with mind, body, and relations in a variety of attentional practices to cultivate desired skills and dispositions, realize deep potentials, and actualize well-being. And such inner work at change must be intertwined with external work at change in social innovation, community building, and igniting change towards a better world. With such attention, intention, reflection, transcendence, and commitment to application and engagement, our youth might yet learn how to resiliently navigate the massive internal and external changes that confront them in ways that align with their core values. I would also point to how the convergence of arts, transformational uses of technology, contemplation, and experiences of land can play pivotal roles in facilitating epiphanies, powerful aesthetic experiences, awe, extraordinary states of consciousness, wonder, and self-transcendence. These are linked to pro-social emotions and outcomes of flourishing and can also transform habitual modes of perception and open people up to new ways of thinking. And these can all be brought into academic classes, whatever the subject, to integrate student lives with academic study, to help them develop skills, mindsets, dispositions, practices, and habits of flourishing in relationships, in body and mind, in vocations, and in communal life, offering highly experiential and deeply reflective environments for fully embodied learning. And thus, contemplation can be seen to be at the heart of whole student, deeply integrated learning and growth, as the American psychologist William James projected over a century ago. Attentional restoration in an era of attentional toxicity to actualize those deep potentials and well-being through expanded self-awareness and resilient attention, and to find a persistent capacity for resilient navigation of change while cultivating the relationships that matter to each other, to other forms of life, and to the land. Thank you.
Thank you, David Germano, for bringing your perspective, your insights, and your wisdom to the festival, and for sharing that with us here on LPTV. Remember that you can catch all of our talks, panels, speaker videos on our YouTube for free. So make sure you subscribe to our channel to catch the replay of your favorite parts and maybe to get to see the great speakers you may have missed. Speaking of YouTube, we know that both youth and lifelong learners, YouTube and TikTok are the go-to channels for peer-to-peer and self-directed learning, especially when it comes to learning social skills, life skills, well-being, and self-care. Effectively, this means today that content creators, platform designers, and software engineers are also social engineers and are able to influence how we receive information and how we behave, how we act towards ourselves, each other, and how we perceive the world around us. In this next session, we're going to explore what we can learn from expert digital creators, expert designers, and software engineers to help us create meaningful learning content and experiences, both for professional, social, and life skills. Joining me now Please welcome Celia Hodont, who's a game user experience strategist and cognitive psychology expert. Celia is an expert on the topic of game user experience and ethics and inclusion. And Celia, you have more than 10 years experience working with gaming studios, including Ubisoft, LucasArts, and Epic's games where you worked on Fortnite. You're also the author of The Gamer's Brain. You're French, Celia, but you're joining us today from California. Welcome.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Bonjour.
It's great to have you with us. We also have Bo Lotto. Bo, there, I can see you are the CEO and founder of the Lab of Misfits. You're American, joining us from the UK. I believe we have a very international panel this afternoon. You're a neuroscientist and an expert in perception and the way we interpret and see things. You're the author of Deviate, the science of seeing things differently, and the founder of the world's first neurodesign studio, the Lab of Misfits, which is part lab, part creative studio that takes a disruptive approach to research and partners with brands to blend science, art, and performance to explore principles in current culture. And finally, Charlie Moreno Romero, you are the head of studies at Souveme TKG. Charlie, I believe you're Colombian born. You've studied in Italy and Spain and many other countries. And now you're based in Estonia, where you're the head of studies at the democratic-based education branch, where you're working with students, teachers, and education designers. And we're going to be hearing from three fantastic panelists from around the globe about what you have to say about what you and your students are experiencing online. Let me just set the scene for everyone watching quickly. Now, YouTube and online videos are the first place that most people go to when they want to learn how to do something. Millions, if not billions, of videos in almost every language on earth are there for when we want to learn a language, a skill, understand history, or even just know how to fix something that we just broke. But platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and others have added to the mass of content available and augmented the number of content creators. And then the algorithms help us discover more and more tutorials and the how-tos. Even teachers today are on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Their migration to these platforms has been boosted by COVID and online schooling. And then, of course, we have MOOCs from world-renowned universities such as MIT, Stanford, Oxford. This has enabled millions of people around the world to access courses from some of the world's best teachers and professors that they would have never had access to. And finally, we also have serious games that are being used more and more in education and business to help learners adapt, train, and pick up new skills. But we know that not all content, games, and learning experiences are created equally. They're not designed and built equally. We've all stopped watching a video because partway through we found it hard to follow the explications, or maybe the quality is just poor. And not all content is created or distributed with the same intentions. Content and experiences can shift our perceptions and our understanding as individuals and as a society. So it's important to be aware of what we're consuming. And if we're building content and learning experiences, it's important to think about how we go about creating them, which is why we have these three great panelists with us here now. I want to ask, we're going to get straight into the subject, and what are some of the best practices for creating meaningful learning and content experiences? Celia, you've got a huge amount of experience in this field. Do you want to tell us what you think are some of the best practices that we need to consider when we're creating experiences and learning content?
Sure, I can try. Well, I'm going to start by saying that making good games is actually very hard. A lot of people want to try. And even just commercial games are just here to be fun and entertaining, having a hard time being successful. It's very difficult. So you have to be to really think about what you want to provide. And you have to have like what I call the UX mindset. So UX, as for user experience, is thinking as you develop the game, thinking about the people who are going to play the game, your users, and really have an iterative cycle, so that at every step of the development, you stop and think about what you're doing. Is it really serving your players, and are you accomplishing your goals? It's in and by itself, it's already a huge task to do. It takes a lot of time. It requires a lot of testing along the way to make sure that the game is providing good usability. Can people understand what to do, and is it fun? But on top of that, if you need your game to have some social impact or educational impact, you also need to make sure that this is really happening. It's not because you make players manipulate certain things that is truly going to be educational, truly going to lead to behavioral change. So this is adding another layer of complexity. We need to care about what we call transfer. So the transfer of a skill that you learn in one situation onto a different situation. And this is like extremely hard to do. We don't have a lot of examples of games that actually do that well. But nonetheless, there's a lot of games that are interesting in terms of how they foster cooperation or social behavior, or we have a few games that try to make you understand depression, like Sea of Solitude. You have games that try to make children manage anxiety, like Mind Light is using like a biofeedback electrode on the forehead of children to read their brainwaves, and as they breathe, they have to control the light in the game so that they can see the monsters, and it's helping with anxiety. So we have examples of games that are really interesting and that fostering some abilities and fostering cooperation. But we have to keep in mind that it's actually very hard to do, and you have to think about it very early on and think about what type of game can foster that. And maybe it's not even a game that can be interesting. I'll let Bo talk about his work, but it's just keep in mind that it's not easy. And it takes a lot of effort to accomplish this.
Certainly, I think many of us, when we're playing games or seeing content, we maybe don't appreciate how all the work and energy that's gone into making it a good experience. Bo, I want to turn to you and ask, for you, what are some of the best practices for creating meaningful learning experiences? And you create experiments, I believe, also. Do you want to tell us some of the best practices that you've picked up from your field and work?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for the invitation to come here, and it's lovely being on a panel with such lovely people. So let's see, I'm a little bit lunatic fringe on this, because actually I think the brain is embodied. And so we actually make most of our meaning by physically interacting with the world, not with digital experiences. So one really key point then is, how can we make our digital experiences somehow taking advantage of the fact that what your brain really needs is interaction. And then, so as Celia said, the importance of feedback, the importance of iteration loops, because Celia also mentioned the point of understanding. So one of the things that's very important for your brain is that through gaming or through any kind of context experience, if you can layer in ability not to know something, but to understand something. Because when your brain gets a sense of understanding, you actually get an intrinsic reward inside your brain, because understanding means you can actually understand a principle that's generalizable. Whereas knowing something is very specific to the context, understanding transcends context. So having content that facilitates people to understand is really, really important. But then it's also the process by which they get there. So for instance, with Celia's games and others, it's through the iteration that you actually discover. So I have a view that as soon as you tell something to someone, you've taken it away from them. So if they can actually discover it, then your brain also encodes that differently. So if you can discover understanding, that's even better. And that's why, as Celia says, it's really, really hard to make a good piece of content, much less a game, that's trying to anticipate all different types of interaction, because the other element is your brain loves complexity, not simplicity. Right? A child's story is like, that's the baddie and that's the goodie, and it's so clear and obvious. But we actually want some layer of complexity to our characters or to the narrative, etc. So having the right kind of complexity is very difficult, because you have to give some knowing, some clarity, but also some discovery. That means some ambiguity, but creating the right kind of ambiguity is not easy.
Certainly.
So, yeah.
No, I love the fact that both yourself and Celia, and because of your background and your training, you're coming at this from how do we actually learn? How do our brains work? That's exactly what we want to be thinking about, because many people think that, sort of learning has to be fun, but it's not just about the fun and the entertainment. What differentiates entertainment from learning? The gaming into a serious game as such. Celia, you mentioned just a few minutes ago about the transferability of skills. I think this is something that you've worked on quite a bit. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about this?
I personally did not work as much on this as other people, but this is really the most important thing when we think about education, or when we think about behavioral change. What we want is whatever people learn in a situation, they can transfer it in another situation. One of the best practices that we've seen so far, and it's going to bounce back on what Bo was saying, is the work, like it's like decades ago from Seymour Papert. He's a constructionist, and the idea of constructionism is that you learn best by constructing your own knowledge, by manipulating things so that create something that is meaningful to you, or solve a problem that is important to you. And so that bounces back of what Bo was saying, that you learn the best by discovering and interacting and just like creating your own knowledge. So these are things that we've known for a long time, but applying it is really difficult. Because, for example, if you use computers to make people do something or just instruct them into something, this is not going to create the spark that you need, the interaction that you need. It's all about creating having an environment where this can be fostered and sparked. And so, for example, it would be making the children or the adults manipulate something so that they can create what they care about. And it's more about leaving all the ingredients there and guiding subtly the learner so that we can create this magic. And that's why some games that are what we call a sandbox, and they are very systemic. So games like Minecraft, Fortnite, in some like lower level, where you can just like manipulate things and take something from one context and reuse it to make something else. Like I remember seeing a player like using a rocket that is a weapon, but he jumped on it so that he could just traverse the map very quickly. That's the sort of things that we want to help players do. But again, it's very difficult to really create.
I love this idea that you mentioned of just sort of like leaving all the ingredients there for players and learners to discover. And so they learn, as Bo said, they learn themselves. Charlie, you are front-facing as such. You're there with the students. You're there with the teachers on a daily basis. What are they saying about the content and the experiences that they're finding online, maybe on YouTube or on Reels? What are they saying about this? And are they finding what they need?
It's a really interesting question. What is it that learners need? We still believe in and betting on an educational system that was built 300 years ago, separating kids by age, organizing their days according to disciplines with the strong authority of an adult. Now, the question is, how can we foster all the soft skills that we're speaking about? Creativity, initiative, divergent thinking. I do believe that, I also play video games and I like them, some of them. But I'm still not convinced about gamification. I believe that we have gone through a trend in which certain contents are gamified, believing that this is what people need, what young people will need. And basically what we are expecting as young people follow a set of steps in order to develop certain skills, which we believe are important and will be important. Now, I work from a perspective of self-determination theory. In self-determination theory, the learner is not somebody who is supposed to be gaining certain knowledge decided by others, but it's a person who takes control over the learning. So within this theory, which is applied in multiple different environments, we aim at developing 3 different kinds of possibility dimensions. One of them is autonomy, the other one is competence, and the third one has to do with relationships. And this is truly important. Whenever there isn't a close relationship with the people who are around, the learners, we are hindering, we are not allowing this possibility of really getting deep into learning. I feel that we need more mentors, tutors, in order to help young people also to explore. I believe in the value of boredom. I am convinced of that the fact that we are going through a dopamine epidemics. Our kids are getting these devices, and they're just jumping into thousands of games, which are really interesting though. And some of them are very useful. But at the same time, our kids, our young people, sometimes are unable to be bored. I think that many of us speak about, when I was a child, I used to get bored and play with bricks. I feel that getting bored has 2 dimensions. One is the boredom that we enjoyed at school, which is shut up and do as I tell you. The other one is nobody's telling me what to do, but I have access to a multiplicity of resources and I can play with those. I have seen kids age 7, 6, just sitting in front of the computer, in front of Scratch, and starting to find out, what is this? Oh, look, when I do this, then I can manage to do this. And they start building the relationship with their peers, relationship with adults. They are autonomous, and they start building on this competence that we are looking for. I don't believe that the contents need to be designed, pre-designed, in order to accomplish a certain curriculum designed by the state or by a higher educational authority. I believe that we need to provide more spaces for kids to explore, to be able to manipulate, to live the experience, as Bo was saying. And at the same time, to start asking at some point how to solve the challenges that we are having as a society. So yeah, I'm a bit critical, but at the same time, I see the possibilities. I have played with kids. It's a great way to get in touch with them. Awesome conversations about, one of my favorite games, Far Cry. But at the same time, I feel that there is some kind of desensibilization in regards to what actually happens around the world.
Charlie, what you were just saying there is you talk to kids, you talk to your students, and you're getting input from them, but you're also getting feedback from them. We're talking about how are the best ways how can we create meaningful content? How can we create great learning experiences? And of course, feedback loops are super important when we're trying to create content and experiences. I want to ask our experts here now, Bo, Celia, I'm going to come to you. How do we create great feedback loops? How do we do this well? Celia, you've had quite a bit of experience, I imagine, using this. You've got anything that you'd like to share with us here as to how to do this?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's, I'm going to try to be short, but it's actually pretty difficult. So when we work on user experience, there are 2 main pillars that we look into. One is called usability, making sure that people understand what to do with the game. And the other one is engageability. That's what I call it. And we care about self-determination theory, just like Charlie was talking about. So we look into these things, but feedback is very important. So in games, we have what we call signs and feedback. Signs are all the things that just by looking and hearing and manipulating the game, can you understand what you can do with it, what are the interactions that you can do with it. And then once you press a button, there's a feedback coming from the game. So feedback can be the animation of your character. It could be something in the interface or a sound effect or a visual effect. Signs and feedback are extremely important just to explain how the game works. So we do a lot of work around this to make them clear and try to reach what we call affordance or form follows function. So just by looking, for example, if you look at Bowser, which is like a very iconic enemy in Mario, it's like the enemy with spikes on its back. In Mario, you usually jump jump on enemies to kill them. But this one has spikes on its back. So just by looking at it, you can anticipate that maybe this is not a good idea to try to jump on it to kill it. In fact, you're gonna get hurt. So it's stuff like this that we work on, and it's really important. And anytime that something's going on in the game, especially when it's a game that has a lot of depth, we want to have clear feedback so that players can understand what's going on. And it doesn't matter if players fail. And this is also one of the things that are really interesting in games. You can fail in games, but what matters is, can people understand why they failed? And as they try again, can they get better? And this is relating to what Shelley was saying in self-determination theory, what we call competence. Competence is being able, if you put effort into it, can you feel your progression? And so when we work on games, sorry, I was trying to be very short, but it's hard to explain that. It's very complicated. We really want to help players progress. And so, yes, they're going to die, then it's going to fail. That's okay, as long as when they come back, they understand why they failed, and then they're going to try again and progress.
Thank you. And I know that's a tough topic to ask you, Celia. You could probably write a book on it. But thank you so much for giving that precise and you did indeed write a book on it, The Game's Brain. So, but thank you for giving us that input, because feedback and those learning loops and enabling, as you say, people to die or to fail, but to understand why and come back and try again is super important. I'm going to ask the same question to Bo, actually, because you've got some experience here. I believe also, any tips or best practices, how you work with and use feedback in order to create the best learning experiences and content?
Well, of course, it's a very good question. I'm not going to be as knowledgeable as Celia, but what I would say is that your brain, everything in your brain is relative. Your brain did not evolve to see absolutes, it evolved to see relationships. So without feedback, your brain has no way of knowing that it even exists, quite apart from whether it has value in that existence. So the importance of that feedback is essential. And then as Celia was saying, that the feedback needs to be non-random, right? If you don't understand, if you can't make progress because of that feedback, then you're actually going to create stress and anxiety in the person, because there's no way of anticipating what's going to happen next. So, but if it's too explicit in some sense, then you also lose the concept of a game, because you lose the concept of discovery. So anyway, the feedback is essential. Having it be non-random, having it be leading people to understanding is really important. And also creating a context. This is the power of play itself. So we're talking about gaming, but I would extend that to the power of play is that if you're asking someone to learn, you're asking them to actually not know something. And your brain hates not knowing. So often when we're in a position of not knowing, we go to panic, we go to stress. Almost everything we do in our life is an attempt to decrease uncertainty, right? Is to know. There's only really one context in which we love not knowing, and that is play. And that then is the power of the game, is the power of play. And we argue that actually science is nothing other than play with intention, right? And so what you really want is to have those feedbacks that give you an intrinsic reward rather than an extrinsic reward. The reason is because intrinsic rewards, they're very motivating, but much more than that, they're durational. So that motivation lasts longer. If I give you an extrinsic reward, I will motivate you, but as soon as I eliminate that extrinsic reward, I've taken away your motivation to do it. So if you can also get feedbacks that increase your intrinsic reward, that's also very good. But anyway, so again, getting people to engage and play in order to learn is why play is essential, why games are important, because that's actually the brain state where your brain is willing to say, I don't know, but I like to create. And then play by itself has no intention. So if you had intention to play, you have science. That's where discovery comes in. So a game is in some sense play with intention. It's not just play, because play by itself has no intention.
Bo, I'm going to come back to you in just a second about sort of changing our perceptions and how we can play and learn. But we're talking about feedback right now, and there's one thing. I was talking to someone earlier today, and in fact, I even heard this in one of the Happiness at School videos that was in our playlist over the lunch break. It's that it's also about getting feedback from all the different user groups that may be experiencing your game or your content or your video out there as well. So Charlie, I think this is something that you've mentioned as well, sort of getting feedback from the teachers, from the students. Is that something that you think is important when you're out there creating learning content and learning experiences?
Absolutely. And during the last 2 years at least, we have engaged in a really interesting process with young people, and is that they build either educational material through YouTube, perhaps, or through podcasting, but also games. And it is fascinating to see how they are giving feedback to each other, because oftentimes they don't have this opportunity in conventional schools. At the same time, we are not only empowering those who are producing, but we are empowering those who are giving the feedback. We are engaging actively in, what Bob was saying, in giving feedback, not because I will get something in exchange for that, but actually it's part of the experience itself of engaging with that, working with my peers. And I feel that this is something that we need to focus a bit more on, which is how to design the gaming experience in a way, giving feedback as part of the gaming experience, in a way that we are promoting cooperation rather than competition, in which there are no losers, but there are winners, in which people can also decide what would be their own reward, what they would get. So again, I feel that we are getting back to the point in which we need to start erasing these roles, these hierarchies of, for instance, teachers giving feedback as the only ones who can give feedback, but rather start playing together with young people, making them also agents of feedback, just by releasing power, right, within classrooms. I feel that we need to also engage in a discussion of what are the contents, who decides on them.
Certainly, and in fact, we had another panelist who was supposed to be with us here this afternoon, Melissa Bessel, and I know that she designs games working in partnerships with governments, and I know that certainly sort of getting context and input from as many user groups is something she's very passionate about, in ensuring that the content that she creates and the experiences are meaningful for everyone out there. Bo, you're focused very much on sort of people's perceptions and then sort of changing perceptions. You've mentioned something, and maybe you remember this. You mentioned using science as a kind of a Trojan horse for teachers to be able to get in. Do you want to tell us a little bit what it is that you're doing there?
Yeah, so we're creating it's predicated on work we've been doing for many years, which is an education in physical spaces, but we're now putting this onto digital spaces. But the idea is that the way you change perception is by, again, you have to get people to go to the very place they usually evolve to avoid. And the way you get them to go there is through play. And the argument here is that play is, that science is play. So what we're empowering children to do is to actually become the scientist, not learn about science, because a lot of people have a misconception of science. They think science is about coming up with truths or the scientific process. In fact, science is a way of being, and the best scientists embody this way of being. The scientific method is actually the craft of science. And so what we want to do is create a space for children to be able to ask the questions, not say, here's the questions, here's the recipe. We're so often teaching children to be sous chefs, not chefs, right? So to be able to create a space where children can actually want to not know, to ask questions, and then make their own discoveries. And then, as Charlie said, actually to have mentors rather than teachers. And the feedback that you give, coming back to the last question, isn't a correction, it's further questions. the result of this program resulted in the youngest published scientist in the world at 8 to 10 years old, and the youngest ever main stage TED speaker when she joined me on stage once. So that's what we're creating. But the reason for it is because we want people, young people, and everyone really, to have these principles like compassion, curiosity, criticality, commitment. We call them the C's. And coming back to an earlier question, that's how you enable children to generalize. That's how you enable anyone to generalize, by giving them principles that transcend context, as opposed to just simple knowledge that's specific to that context. Because curiosity applies everywhere, but you can learn it within, for instance, the context of science as a Trojan horse for that curiosity, or the Trojan horse for courage. But then you also need to guide them in how to then, and that's where the mentor comes in, how you then generalize the principles that they discovered, often unconsciously, into new domains.
Okay, so we've had some great feedback and information, tips, perspective from you all. And it's fantastic to have three such diverse experts here on the panel. But what I want us to also think about are some of the challenges and the important points that we need to consider and to take into account when we're creating learning content and serious games together. Celia, yeah, I know that you're also focused on ethics and safety. So what do we need to think about when we're bringing kids together online for learning together, or even bringing adults online for learning together? What are some of the important points?
Sure. Just like anything, we have to be careful about who our children are playing with, and what's the situation here. If it's an environment that you entirely control and you use like a game and you play with kids and you do experiments, it's all fine. Now, if you use an environment that is commercial, and you want to play or let your children play on a certain platform, you have to be careful about what's going on there, making sure that you know who your kids are playing with, because there's always some harassment that can be possible. Like the latest ADL report is not really good. It's showing that a lot of kids and adults are experiencing harassment and unwanted behaviors online, and so this is a reality that we need to be mindful of, and we also need to be careful of when there's, again, it's all commercial games. Their games are fun and they're made to be fun, but we also need to be careful about their monetization model, and how do they earn money. And because there's sometimes what we call dark patterns can be used. It's ways we can like deceive players to make them buy something that they don't really need, or they can the use of more like shady practices, like forcing people to come back on a specific moment, otherwise they're gonna miss something really amazing. This is what we call the fear of missing out, and so there's a lot of practices like this that are not really great. They're all around the economic model of certain games. So we have to be careful about this. This is the main limitation, again, for commercial games. Just make sure that what is your child playing, what mode is he playing or is she playing, because there's a lot of different modes on the same game. Who are they playing with, and just like be there to monitor that, and how what is the economic model of the game, so that you can make sure that there's nothing too shady there that's putting pressure on children to buy stuff who come back. So that's the main limitation for commercial games. And then for the other games, just like I was saying earlier, and it's not easy to foster certain abilities and to encourage transfer of these abilities onto another context.
No, certainly we want to be aware of all the great things that we can do to create this content, but also aware of some of the things we need to be cautious of and look out for. So thank you for highlighting some of those. Charlie, for yourself, challenges or important points, not necessarily the negative, but the good things also that we need to take into consideration when we're creating learning content and learning experiences. What do you think we need to include in there?
Okay, let me first highlight a little bit where I'm talking from. I'm in Estonia, 1.3 million people. You can pay taxes in 5 minutes on your phone in this country. Actually, the internet access was considered a human right in 2001, one of the first countries. 99% of the public services are online available. From 2000, the year 2000, 29% of the people had access to the internet. 2016, 91% of the people. Most of the e-learning solutions were available already before COVID. However, there was this challenge, which is that young people, and there are this is in the Estonia Human Development Report 2020. Most of the young people are using the internet or e-solutions or the digital experience to find information, for entertainment, for communication, but there is very little social engagement. I feel that we're still preaching about democracy, preaching about citizenship, but we are not actually providing the possibilities for this to happen as an embodied practice, as Bo was saying. I think that we also need to start considering about ICT underlying conditions, the environmental crisis and exploitative labor. As Celia was mentioning, people's mental health, young people's mental health. I feel that we need to work, and we could work more on media literacy, and especially on participatory skills, how to train adults to be facilitators of media literacy. I believe this is a must, something that perhaps content designers and producers could start considering. Now the possibilities are huge. Besides adult engagement, I feel that we need to also support parents on how to manage functional limits when using devices, when using games. We need to promote more cooperation over competition. We need to focus on the educational commons, how young people can get together, co-design, co-create, co-design, co-evaluate learning experiences, also within digital environments. And finally, how to promote autonomy, competence, and relationships beyond consumerism, beyond just a kid as a consumer. I feel that there are tons of possibilities. We need to start collaborating more, civil society and producers, developers.
Certainly, I love your perspective on this, Charlie, because we can create the best digital online learning content and experiences, but we also need to train and help teachers, students, and learners to use them, and to use them really well. Media literacy, as you mentioned there, sort of the collaboration. We've already talked about feedback, but also sort of how do they come together and create relationships with other users, as you mentioned about society and democracy. How can we do that through these online games and platforms? And we need to also sort of skill up people to be able to do that through media literacy and digital literacy. I see a hand going up from Charlie. You want to add something? Go for it.
Just to add something that actually is tremendously important to engage parents. I feel that the game should not only be for young people, families getting together, enjoying, also designing together these functional limits is a crucial part of what we need to start considering from now on.
I'll raise my hand for that as well, because I agree that sort of gaming and collaboration are great ways of creating relationships and keeping and fostering and nurturing those relationships going forwards as well. We've got just 6 minutes left here, and with this great panel of speakers, visionaries that you have, all of your experience, but all of your future vision, I want you to turn on those future goggles that you have. And I want to ask you what you believe are going to be the drivers for the next generation of digital content, digital learning experiences that are going to impact learning and impact our society. Who wants to go first? Ladies first, Celia. I'll put you in the hot seat.
Okay, it's always hard to tell, but what I've certainly seen trending in the game industry and in video games in general is that people are not just players; they're becoming makers. We see that, and there's a lot of creative modes, whether it is on Minecraft, in Fortnite, or we see that in Roblox, where kids are creating their own games. And it's developing worlds that we talk a lot about the metaverse recently. But it's interesting to see how people are not just consumers and they can actively take part into creating this new space where we're gonna play, but also do other stuff, just hang out, dance together, watch movies, and just build stuff. So that to me is really exciting because hopefully if we can get there and it can be decentralized and people can really be owners of what they're making, it can be really interesting because then we can foster this scientific mindset, and we say in child development that all the children are born scientists, and so we just need to encourage that, and hopefully this is what we can be able to do and encourage and play and encourage experimentation and be curious.
Fantastic. I love that experimentation, curiosity, play. I've maybe something the same, similar or different from Bo. What are your perspectives? What do you believe is going to be the driver for the next generation of digital content? Something that's going to impact learning and society?
Everything Celia just said. And I might just add that and it's also a fundamental principle for making anything that's of quality, which is you imagine the future where, and Celia was actually speaking to this, that you make it relevant and you make them part of it. These are two fundamental attributes of any sort of interaction. And wouldn't it be wonderful we could actually make new discoveries as a consequence and put people into that discoveries of self, discovery of the world. And then that's such a powerful feedback. But also to create spaces where you can foster true relationships, okay, where it's truly social. Our brain evolved to be social. To not be social is not an option, right? The problem is so much of what's out there are proxies for social. Facebook is not a social experience. It's a bit like, you know, McDonald's provides foods and they key on the sugar and the salts and the fats, and it doesn't provide nutrition, but it satisfies those needs. These are proxies for something. Facebook does the same thing. Facebook's like the McDonald's of social. Could we actually create spaces where people are actually fostering deeper social relationships that are meaningful, because there's a possibility of then having deep relationships with people that are diverse. And in that, you increase compassion, decrease intolerance, and finding those shared principles and creating spaces for that discovery and trusted spaces, which Celia and Charlie are talking to about the dangers of some spaces if they're not trusted. Yep. So that's what I would like.
Fostering compassion, fostering that curiosity. These are all things that we've been talking about throughout the day here in this, what we call the planetism mindset. Also, Charlie, last but not least, over to yourself. What do you believe, based on your perspectives, what you're hearing from your students, your teachers, what are going to be the drivers for the next generation of digital content that are going to impact, change, revolutionize our learning and society?
Yeah, I'm really happy and honored to be in this inspiring panel with inspiring people. I feel that definitely we need to engage more the users, young people. But at the same time, we need to start joining somehow the virtual and the actual. It's not about virtual and real. The virtual experiences are real for users, for gamers, but rather how to link them in meaningful ways. Still, I believe that we have way too much dopamine. I believe that we have way too much sedentarism. Kids are not moving enough. Perhaps the future involves something that combines these two worlds, the actual and the virtual, in which kids can solve something inside of the game and then go out to the real world, to the actual world, and also engage with other people, with other players in this. I remember this Pokemon game that was fascinating because kids finally were moving around the city, were recognizing their cities, just looking for some Pokemon, but at the same time they were moving, they were exercising. That was great. I feel that is something, and we need to start paying more attention to how to reconcile these two areas, which seem to be at war. Well, I think that definitely we need to equip young people with the tools to explore that curiosity they are born with. So thank you, Celia. Thank you both for this inspiring work that you are doing. And thank you, Kristen, for getting us here together.
Thank you to Charlie. Thank you to Celia. Thank you to Bo. It's been absolutely fabulous having with you here on LPTV at the LearningPlanet Festival. Thank you so much to you. If you joined partway through, you can watch the full discussion for free on our YouTube channel. And in fact, all of the videos from all of our sessions from the entire 5 days of the festival are going to be available for replay. So make sure you subscribe and you don't miss out. Now, wow, can you believe it that we've just brought you almost 10 hours of continuous free content dedicated to creating the future of learning, with deep dives into critical subjects like youth empowerment, access to quality education, the metaverse, mental health, and of course, planetisms. As planetisms, how we can be learning to take better care of ourselves, each other, and our planet. And this is only day one of our 5 days of festival. There are hundreds of other events taking place online and in real life, all of which are free for you to explore, to participate in, and to learn from. So although LPTV will be wrapping up this festival in just a few minutes, the learning continues throughout the week and indeed throughout the year with the Learning Planet Youth Fellows, the Youth Council, and our more than 350 Global Alliance partners. Now, to wrap up our broadcast, we're going over to join Dr. Stephen Friend, the Visiting Professor of Connected Medicine at Oxford University and President of the Strategic Advisory Board of the Learning Planet Institute. We're going to be joining François Teddy, founder and president of the Learning Planet Institute, and someone you saw right at the beginning of our LPTV broadcast today, Olivier Bréchard, director of the Learning Planet Alliance. They're going to recap for us and discuss all that they've seen and heard during today's first day of the festival and to highlight what we should look out for in the days ahead. So, Olivier, François, Stephen, I'm handing the mic over to you.
Great, Kristen, thank you so much. It's hard not to use hyperbole, so I have to start with wow, wow, wow. I feel so lucky to be part of the festival on this UNESCO Day of Education. There's no question our issues and the planet's sustainability feel to be spinning out of control with hyper-acceleration because they are. Throughout this day, it's been awesome to see so many fractal pieces of the Learning Planet Initiative, real evidence of creating the space, the inevitability of the convergence needed at this time of overwhelming fragility. My mind's spinning delightfully on such themes brought up by Cecilia's and Peter, Keisha, Lena, Stefania, so many others regarding the release of power in the classroom. Power is play, as a place where it's safe not to know and discover, zipping in and out of the virtual world, peer-to-peer learning, flipping classical learning, science as a Trojan horse. It's all sort of swirling. I hope it doesn't end. And before giving the further day one concluding remarks, I want to shout out an emerging effort that will extend the energy of this festival by the next year, where we're going to have a year-long seminar series coordinated with Olivier and Francois called, ready for this? Game-Changing Skills I Wish All Could Engage. The topics are going to be things like hacking the upper ground, building tools that amplify the group, and so we'll have more on that later. So now back to the concluding remarks. Over the decades, I've enjoyed listening to Francois convey so many key aspects of education, but there's one aspect of education seems to stand out, and that is throughout history, countries have provided education for a practical reason, to build the skills they deem essential, that is, by those who rule their systems to help them. We should now ask, what happens when those that rule abuse that rule? What happens when those systems become unsustainable and in fact do great harm? One might say we are at a time in history when those that rule are at best distracted from asking what our planet needs. At such times, it feels essential that we ask what the planet needs and what education must look like. These inalienable rights and duties are, as you have seen, or you're going to see, at the heart of the Learning Planet initiative, and more specifically, the call to action to build convergence that all of you here at the festival hold in your palms and your hearts. As you have seen, however precious it is to us, the planet mission is critical even more to those yet born. I feel in these moments of chaos, it can actually be helpful to look back into the past for some general guidance that stands the test of time. So let's zip back to Abraham Lincoln, 1860s, Civil War, when he said, "Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. We will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us." I think Abraham Lincoln would be glad if we resurrected and sort of twisted this and stated, "Fellow planetizens, we cannot escape history. We will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one another of us." And finally, during the festival, we're going to be asking, what can I learn from this festival? What new insights or tools can I find and use? This is essential and it should occur. This is in fact part of convergence. But at the same time, I suggest that as you go through the festival, prompted by what JFK said in his inaugural address just 60 years ago when he stated, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." So today, let's say, planetizens, ask not just what the LPI can do for you, ask also what you can do for our planet. And so let's seize this precious moment with a gigantic thanks to the entire Learning Planet Festival team. Over to you, Francois.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's a pleasure to hear your vibrant remarks. I think that, you say that we have this power structure that is not empowering the youth and not enabling them to learn what they need to learn. That resonates deeply with one of the core concepts we like here, which is the concept of ikigai. So as you know, the ikigai, everyone should be able to find your ikigai, which is, the best way to have meaning and impactful lives, which is the when you find intersection between what the planet needs, what you know how to do and can learn how to do, what you love to do, and the resources you can find. The thing is that if we start thinking about what is the ikigai of the current school system, it's not providing with, what the world truly needs. And it's not helping the students do what they truly love. And it's not necessarily enabling them to learn the skills they need. And very often it lacks the resources it needs to fulfill its missions. So, what I resonate with when I hear you is, can we, as planetizen, define a school system and an education system at all ages that will enable every planetizen to find their ikigai and be able to do something that the planet needs, that they love, that they can learn to do, and that they can find resources for. So I think that would be an interesting ikigai for a planetizen learning ecosystem. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen and Francois. I think now we're almost wrapping up the festival for today, and there are 4 more days coming. And I'm just saying maybe a few more words about what is going to happen next. So you did a big thank you, Stephen, to the Learning Planet team. I'm saying again, a huge thank you to the 500 partner organizations that are making this festival possible. The truly collaborative spirit is really something that moves me, and is probably the biggest victory to see so many different people doing things together and sharing their ideas. So tomorrow we are going to deep dive a bit further into the transformation of education systems and lifelong learning. We're going to try to go quite deep. For instance, in partnership with Arizona State University, we're going to talk about the critical transitions in higher education for planetary health. And this will be at 3 p.m. CET. But there are many other sessions that will happen and events near to you about learning for sustainability. The following day is another action track where we try to broaden even further our thinking about how to create a better society and how to create a learning society. So in addition to the transformation of the education system, we will look at how cities, learning ecosystems in the global south, how all kinds of stakeholders and notably also all the social entrepreneurs can contribute to transforming and creating a learning society. There will be a session notably about the replication of our very best systemic replication of really good initiatives, which is always, and the adaptation and how you do this locally. So that's another thing. This will be on the 26th of January. On the 27th, we are going to continue the conversation about exploring futures around learning in the 21st century. So new narratives. We are going to deep dive into the how shall we learn with the next gen AI. We are also going to look how we reconcile traditional wisdom and science and technology and arts. So really the conversation is very open. And the good thing about the program, then on the January 28, we'll have a very strong focus on young game changers and programs for young game changers, and also showcasing all the initiatives that are stemming out from the festival. We are going to be launching an imagination circle that will be working throughout the year, a Teachers for the Planet circle, which also will be mobilizing many contributors throughout the year. So yes, the festival is a highlight, but many more things are coming. And what is also interesting is, as it is a co-constructed festival, many people come and suggest other types of subjects. So there'll be quite a few sessions around peace building. And I think this is very important, hasn't been yet at the forefront of a festival, but many different approaches about building peaceful futures is an interesting subject. There will be some about also really looking at on the ground education in adverse circumstances. For instance, with refugee camps, we have quite a few testimonies from refugees starting tomorrow morning. So that's to give you a flavor of what is coming. You really have to deep dive into the festival program. It looks a bit intense given the number of sessions at the beginning, but I'm sure you can find something that really interests you. And we really welcome you to come, join, and share with your friends and colleagues. I don't know if you want to add something, Stephen or Francois. So maybe, Kristen, a huge thank you for your support throughout the day, and I give you the mic again.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Olivier, Francois, and Stephen. Thank you for sharing your resume of today and everything that's happening over the next few days at the festival. And as you mentioned, the coming year at the Learning Planet. This brings our 2023 LPTV festival broadcast to a close, but you can continue to participate in the festival events via our website and to interact with our community on our Discord server and keep up to date with all the latest news via our social media channels. It remains just for me to say thank you to you all for watching and participating. Thank you to the Learning Planet team for such a packed day of speakers, great speakers and guests, and all the Learning Planet Festival partners who've helped make this possible. Thanks also to all the youth fellows and council members who have taken the mic, and thanks to all the LPTV guests and speakers who've made this such a great festival launch day. This is Kristen Davis signing out of our LPTV studio here in Paris, France, and looking forward to seeing you at one of our Learning Planet events again soon. Goodbye and thank you.